I'm Zach Childs, and welcome to the Truetone Lounge. Today, our guest is Chad Jeffers.
Hey, Zach.
Chad is an individual who has thrived in an ever-changing music industry. He has been an artist on RCA with the group Pinmonkey. He has played with a variety of high-level acts, including Kenny Loggins and Keith Urban, and he's spent the last almost 13 years playing with Carrie Underwood. He plays a variety of instruments, including guitar, dobro, lap steel, pedal steel, saxophone, harmonica, mandolin, banjo, ganjo, on and on and on. And the reason that he continues to thrive and work is because he has a can-do attitude, and he's determined, and he's such a hard worker. And glad to have you on the show today, Chad.
Thank you, Zach. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the nice intro. I feel like we're done now. This is awesome. Quit while I'm ahead.
So now I'm going to bring you down. So, Chad, you and I, we've known each other for 26 years, something like that. Something like that. And just so we can set the right tone of the interview, we were in a band together that we started with some friends.
That's right.
And we only knew like a handful of songs, and somehow we got noticed by two high-level Nashville session players,
right?
A pianist and a guitarist,
right?
And I don't know if should we name names or not.
I think it's fine.
Okay,
yeah.
So it was Matt Rollins and Kenny Greenberg,
right?
Okay, and even though we only knew a handful of songs, we had never played a gig in our lives. Okay, this is around, 97?
Yeah.
Yeah, around 1997. They took us to Tony Brown's office. Now, at this point, Tony Brown was just about the most powerful man in Nashville.
Yeah.
He was producing and the head of MCA. He had George Strait. He had Vince Gill. He had Reba. He had the Mavericks. He had all these really big commercial acts and also artistic acts, like Lyle Lovett and
Marty
Stewart. This guy was a big deal. And so we were in a band together. We had never played a gig, and we were playing in Tony Brown's office. And the feedback that we got afterwards was that Tony Brown said, and I apologize in advance. I'm not going to say the word, but Tony Brown said we looked like a bunch of effing choir boys.
Which, to Tony's defense, we probably did.
Yeah, I mean, you had a sweater vest and I had a dickie on.
And that was during the time where, getting a record deal was everybody, that was it. Once you got a record deal, it's like, oh yeah, we need to create music and we need to, it's like, no, it's like all about getting the record deal. And that was, I'll never forget that day. And that was amazing.
We really had the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
So let's back up and kind of start earlier. So tell us about your late father and his kind of musical influence on your life.
Yeah, my dad was a singer-songwriter, and we were born and raised with Conway Twitty kind of music and Don Williams and Townes Van Zandt. And my dad, he had a gig coming up, and it was in front of 1,500 Rainbow Girls. Mm-hmm. And so Rainbow Girls is kind of like girls that from 13 to 18 years old, kind of, junior league kind of thing. And so my brother, who's also a professional musician, he and I thought, well, why don't we back my dad up? We'll be his backup band. I'm 8 years old. My brother's about 11. And so we back my dad up. He agrees to let us go and play. And so it's at Freedom Hall in Johnson City. So it's a big arena in front of these girls. And when we get through playing, we were the last people on the program. And the girls literally chase us into the dressing room. So my brother and I, we're running scared out of our mind, running like, the Beatles, we're like running into the dressing room. We close the door and, we're both looking at each other, just big eyes. And I said, I don't know what that was, but that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so from that moment on, we started our little family band. And our dad was, he was the ringleader in terms of helping us. And he had been to Nashville and he had written some songs with Bill Anderson, and which Conway and Loretta had recorded, never released. But hopefully maybe one day they'll put it on something. But it was a lot of he just kind of coached us and mentored us through what we need to do and everything like that. And then eventually Matt Mahaffey joined the band, and Matt's gone on to be a successful producer and everything like that. So that was the start of our kind of my brother and both of our careers was at that early of an age, because we just knew that purposefully that's what we really wanted to do.
Yeah.
Kind of a side note, when I got my very first gig with the Wilkinsons, I know I'm skipping a little bit ahead, but it's relevant to this story, is the very first gig I ever played as a professional side guy was in Freedom Hall, Johnson City, Tennessee. So all the thousands of venues that we could have played, it was that one. And so very serendipitous, I guess.
Yeah, there's a neat way, and so many times in life there's like some things come full circle, and that's a neat moment of that. So with your dad had kind of been in the music industry, kind of one foot in it, and I'm sure he had a lot of advice for you in a lot of ways, and then he coached you. What were some golden nuggets from your dad?
Some golden nuggets. I mean, with some of the things that he would tell. One thing, this is back in the late '80s, and he worked at Eastman Chemical Company, or Eastman Kodak, like Kodak Film and everything, and he always told my brother and me, and Matt even. Matt was kind of like our brother from a different mother kind of guy, and so he would kind of put Matt in with us as brothers, and he said, "Hey guys," he goes, "if you really want to make it in the music business, if you really want to do this for a living, don't ever get a job with benefits." Because the moment you get a job with benefits, everything's out the window, because you become comfortable and safe, and you don't really want to rock the boat in any way, because you might lose your benefits.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the nuggets. The other one was you've got to go to where the music is. So for us being country, Nashville was the place. Matt eventually went to L.A.
Yeah.
Or if you go to New York. So I mean, he's like, you've got to go there, because I grew up in Kingsport, Tennessee, East Tennessee, so it's 5 hours from Nashville. His whole point was, they're not going to call you in Kingsport saying, "Hey, come down, we have a session." You've got to be there, and you got to become like a part of the fabric of the community of this place. So that was the other strong nugget. And so, of course, my brother and I both moved to Nashville.
Yeah. Matt Mahaffey. Tell us a little bit about him for those who might not be familiar with what he's done.
So Matt was our drummer in the band, and he went on, he and my brother were roommates at college at MTSU, and he went on to produce some stuff on the Shrek album. He toured with Beck. He did the Expedia.com. Well, that's Matt. So that's Matt, and he wrote it and recorded it, and then he's also right now. What's just incredibly big is he's done all the music for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on Nickelodeon. So he's done all the music for that, and he's just done tons of commercials and worked with Pink, and I mean, just an incredible talent.
Yeah.
And so he often says, that my dad was one of the help mentor and orchestrate him to get where he is today.
Yeah. So you and your brother Michael, made the decision to move to Nashville, and you came to Belmont, and that's where we met.
That's right.
Yeah. What did you learn from Belmont?
I don't remember classes because I mean, we were both in the music business department, and I remember what I remember the most is just working. I worked all the time. If I wasn't in the studio, I was out playing gigs with other people. A lot of writers, doing writers' nights around town. And just learning more just about the instrument, practicing, and that's what my real takeaway, and being in bands and recitals and all those things. But it was more about getting off campus and just meeting people and building kind of my network of people and relationships, and to help grow with the music.
Yeah. How important are relationships?
It's everything. And the thing with gigs, you're going to get on a good gig, you're going to get on a bad gig, and to me they're both very very meaningful, because even the bad gigs, if you have those relationships with people, the relationships are lasting. The bad gig isn't, you know.
Right.
So it's this too shall pass. But but a lot of times those turn into war stories. You know, when you talk to other people, like playing for Tony Brown,
Yeah.
and those things. It's the band never worked out, but you and I are still buddies.
Well, and those situations, even in the bad gigs, you end up playing with other people that move on to other good gigs, and then you pull them onto those. I've told people that I've never gotten a job from a resume.
Right.
And it's all word of mouth.
Yes.
And then the only way you get that word of mouth in those relationships is by putting yourself out there.
Absolutely.
Is by playing.
And the same way, I've never gotten a gig from an audition.
Yeah.
I've done some of the auditions where it's a cattle call, and I cannot stand those.
Yeah.
And everything I've ever gotten in my whole career has been, hey, Chris Rodriguez says you're the guy, so you're the guy. Kenny Loggins calling me personally saying that.
Yeah.
Chris McHugh telling Keith Urban about me from a demo, and it's always been word of mouth. So relationships are crucial.
Yeah. So let's hit on you kind of mentioned before the Wilkinsons. So so how did that come about? So that was your first kind of pro gig with an act that was signed. How did that come about?
Yeah. So you and I were in the band around 97, and we went on into 98, I guess. And we did the Tony Brown office visit, and then we played for a lot of different other just publishers or anyone who would listen, right? I mean, we eventually got up to, I think, 4 songs or 5 songs, and we're like, all right, let's take these to everybody. And we played at a publishing company called Hayes Street that Alan, one of our piano players, worked at.
That's
Alan Hall.
In the group Selah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's amazing. And we played at Hayes Street, and I remember where we played, but I don't remember like all the people. I remember there's quite a few people kind of crammed in there, but we just played and then left, and I didn't think anything about it. As graduation came from my time at Belmont, was coming to an end, and I was about to graduate, I remember thinking, man, did I major in a minor like instrument, like with dobro? I mean, because that was my main thing. And I thought, did I major in a minor instrument? And I got a lot of self-doubt and all that stuff.
Right, because you're thinking, I majored in the wrong instrument because it's not important enough. It's not an important enough instrument.
Exactly, and there's not a lot of people that play it, so it must not be important.
Yeah.
Well, it was soon after that, just literally after thinking that I got a call from Fitzgerald Hartley, which is a large artist management company, and it was Bill Simmons, and he said, hey, he goes, I've got an artist that has a lot of dobro in their music, and Doug Johnson heard you play. You were in some band in college, and he heard you play, and he says, you're the guy. So you're the guy. Can you do Fanfare, which is now CMA Music Fest? But he said, can you do Fanfare with my artist, the Wilkinsons?
Yeah.
And I said, sure. Do you need to hear me play? Do you want me? And he goes, no, Doug Johnson says, you're the guy. You're the guy.
Because somebody vouched for you.
Exactly.
And that's what it's all about, is people vouching for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was fun. So I did Fanfare, and then they didn't do anything. They had their song was 26 Cents, and it was flying up the charts, and they didn't really do much during the summer months. And then in the fall, they got on the Alan Jackson tour. So I kind of heard rumblings that they were putting together a band. So I thought, well, okay, I want to get in front of them, but this is before any kind of social media or and they weren't playing out. So I'm like, how can I get my name in front of them to let them remember who I am and everything?
Right.
And so 26 Cents had just gone #1. So I went and got a quarter and a penny and put it on train tracks and had it, the train run out. Of course, it smashed. It's all flat, and so I put it on a 5x7 card and I sent it to their management because I knew where that was, and it wasn't creepy, sending like to their home address.
Right.
But I sent it to their management saying, "Hey, congratulations on your smash hit, 26 Cents. Hope to see you very soon." And I sent it to them just to get my name in front of them again. And about a week later, they called. They were laughing. It's so corny, so cheesy.
Yeah.
But it worked.
But it did the job.
And so they said, "Oh, you had it the whole time, but that was great." Yeah. So then that's when they started putting the band together. That's when I went and did the Johnson City, my very first gig. And then we were on the Alan Jackson tour, which was amazing. You know, that was my first real gig.
So then you're going from, kind of playing the singer-songwriter, kind of club gigs and maybe, again, playing fanfare and stuff. All of a sudden you're on a major tour. What are you learning? What are some of the, hard knocks, some of the things that were, kind of tough to learn?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that was just learning the rhythm of the road in terms of, keeping yourself healthy, eating right and things like that. Alan had a great catering and all that stuff. But, when you get out on the festivals, it's really bad food, and it's just learning to navigate toward that. Making sure my gear was up to snuff, because a lot of that was, a lot of this stuff I was piecemealing together and from college, like just putting little pedal boards together or, just making sure all of that, endorsements, that for me as a guitar player, it's all about the endorsements, and so I was just trying to contact anybody and everybody, and which, then, through the years, I'm like, I only endorse things that I really use and things like that. But, it was just a matter of just getting into the rhythm of the road for me, being out there with the Wilks.
Yeah. So I guess the next thing is Pinmonkey.
Right. So to back to college, I was doing a lot of volunteer work through the Music Business Service Corps. I believe that's what it was. And so that we would just go out, like if there was a party or something, they need someone to work the doors, like check tickets or whatever, I would do that. And one of the guys I met was actually he worked in the office with Alison Krauss. And so he and I started talking and become friends. And he said, hey, he goes, a friend of mine is playing the Bluebird, and he's looking for a dobro player. He goes, I've never even heard you play, so I don't even know. But he goes, I can tell that you kind of, you're kind of with it. And he goes, would you want to do that? And I said, well, sure. So he calls this guy up, and I go over to this guy's house, and we run through a couple of songs. He goes, cool, do you want to do the Bluebird? And I said, sure. So we're opening up for Gretchen Peters, which at the time was, she was like the big hot hit songwriter. And so we did the Bluebird together, and then he called me again to do another writer's night, and it turned into an ongoing thing. And then we eventually we said, well, why don't we get a bass player? So we tried a bunch of different bass players, and then I just said, hey, my brother plays bass too. And he goes, why didn't you say that to begin with? And so my brother came in, and so we were a three-piece. We played a lot for people that live in Nashville, down at Guido's, back behind San Antonio Taco Company.
Yeah, a little pizza joint.
It was the size of like this little area right here was the stage. And so we did a thing on, I think Thursday nights called Whiskey Fireside Hour or something. Rod Picott put it on. And so, there would literally be 10 people in the audience, but we were just trying to work up a catalog in music. And then eventually we added our drummer, Rick Shell, and we added him as a member because we didn't want to pay him as a side guy. So we're like, just become a member. And so, and then that's what started Pinmonkey, which once I got the Wilkinson gig, Pinmonkey, we started doing a lot of recording. My dad had recorded an album, and he had bought a Roland VS 1680, one of the old school hard disk recorders. And so then that's what Pinmonkey actually did our first album on in my mom and dad's bonus room on the VS 1680, which is what somewhat led us to get a record deal with RCA.
So in that process, you're learning about recording and such because you're having to engineer it and all that stuff yourself.
Very correct, yeah. And so, being at Belmont, I learned a lot, about tape, and we were recording, digital tape and things like that. And then the 1680 had just somewhat come out, and so learning, kind of, getting my feet under me with that. And so, I was making all the mistakes in the world, and, and it was somewhat limited in terms of what we have now. And around that same time is when I met Jimmy Olander, and I was out with the Wilkinsons, and Diamond Rio was closing the show, and he was just warming up, and I literally just walked up and I said, hi, I'm Chad Jeffers. And he goes, hi, I'm Jimmy O. And I'm like, I really like your guitar playing. And we just started a conversation, and then that's what turned into, he being my mentor since '98, so 22 years or so.
Yeah.
And so part of the recording after doing the 1680 with Pinmonkey, he said, hey, you might want to upgrade to Pro Tools. And I said, yeah, but I don't know Pro Tools. And he said, great, get Pro Tools and learn it. And so he was definitely one of the mentors along the way with the recording process and everything that helped me dramatically.
Yeah. So, Pinmonkey, gets a deal with RCA, and so this is, again, you've been a sideman. Now all of a sudden you're part of a band that's signed.
Right.
You're meeting, with the label head, Joe Galante, all this
Yeah.
stuff. So what are you learning? What are you learning now, as being an artist, being on a label?
Well, you're an artist, you're an entrepreneur, you're a business person, we had a great manager, Rick Alter, that helped us kind of navigate through a lot of especially the business stuff. And he comes from a booking background, so it helped us a lot with booking, routing and things like that. And we had the independent album, which really helped us get on the road. That was one of our main tour supports, was the independent album, of getting out and hustling it and selling it. And while we were actually finishing that, we were making the first RCA album. So we're taking meetings with publishing companies, with A&R from RCA, meeting with Paul Worley, who was our producer.
Yeah.
So like every day it was chock full of meetings, and all of us were songwriters. So we started, getting more into the songwriting realm of stuff. So it was taking a sip from a fire hose. You're just really going all out. But it was our dream. So it was very passionate for us. So we were really, we were all in.
Yeah. So now we met up again at this point, and and I was guitar teching for Brad Paisley.
That's right.
And of course, Pinmonkey was opening some shows for Brad, and I was really glad to see all of y'all again, especially you. And then I'll just say, Brad liked to play practical jokes.
He's known for the prankster, yeah.
And he pulled quite a few of them.
He did.
So my favorite one was while Pinmonkey was doing their meet and greet, he had the VJ with CMT, which at that point they were playing a lot of music videos. They had him come out and introduce Pinmonkey early, while y'all were still doing the meet and greet. And so myself and some of the other guys in Brad's band, we came out with our instruments and with monkey masks and monkey gloves on, and we came out and performed a couple of songs. And the audience, and of course y'all heard it being announced, here, ladies and gentlemen, Pinmonkey. And we came out, and our last song was "Hey Hey We Are Pinmonkey," copying the Monkeys song.
Right.
So, what was your recollection of that?
Oh, it was funny because we had the meet and greet, and typically, we're a brand new artist, so we don't have a lot of people come through meet and greet,
Yeah.
And so we had like a lot of people this day, and we're like, where are all these people coming from? And what we didn't know that Brad was kind of stacking it, having more people on there, and
yeah.
So we were in it was like an old auditorium from what I remember, and so it was very reverberant. I mean,
Yes.
it was, and we heard, "Hi, it's Pinmonkey," and we're like, "What? No, they can't do that. We're back here." We're all like, and so then we run out, once again, kind of like the Beatles running out, and we see you guys out there on stage, and Brad's on the side recording it with a video camera, so.
Yeah.
It was, and thank God, I mean, there's a little lady that stood up and clapped for you guys. She's like, "Oh, you guys are so good."
There was one little old lady that at the end,
I really
she
like these
stood up
Pinmonkeys.
because everyone else, I think they realized that they were being had.
Yeah.
And then the real Pinmonkey came out, and y'all were fantastic.
Oh,
I always enjoyed your sets. So then you did your first album, and then you cut a second record, and then as what sometimes happens, things weren't moving in the direction that you wanted.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first album, I think it only sold, 80,000 units or so, which is a failure on a major label, especially back then.
Yeah.
You had to reach, 250,000 or 500,000 to kind of be worthy, you know.
Right.
And so we went ahead and started cutting a second album with Mark Bright as kind of a, you know, they're like, let's keep doing this. And then it was after that when they released a single from that, Let's Kill Saturday Night, and it just really wasn't moving the needle for them. So they're like, all right, well, we're gonna have to move on.
Yeah.
And you know, our manager called Mark Bright and said, well, you know, they got dropped, and they still want to keep making this record that they were kind of making. And Mark's like, I'm all in. Like I didn't work with them just because they're signed to RCA. I worked with them because I really liked the music.
Yeah.
And so we started making the independent album, which eventually did come out, and we did most of that at one of the studios in Nashville, 17th Avenue Sound, where Mark, we just got in there on an off day and we got it for real cheap and did a lot of the tracking, and then brought everything back to my house. And I was up to snuff with Pro Tools by then. Mm-hmm. And so, and then that's when Mark Bright and I actually really got to know each other, because it was he and I sitting there mixing and working on different different pieces of the project.
Yeah.
And which of course led to other things in terms of he was producing Carrie Underwood at the time, which helped me in terms of landing that gig. Once again, about relationships.
So as Pinmonkey was kind of, making this, an indie record instead of on a major label, then you get another offer.
Right.
And you had a really difficult choice of whether to stay with Pinmonkey or take this offer. So tell us about the offer.
Yeah, well, so because I was songwriting, I got the chance to write with a guy named Wayne Kirkpatrick, who was like on my bucket list of songwriters. You know, I mean, I've just always been a fan of his. Songwriting, musicianship, artist, producer, he's everything. And so when I got that call to go write a song with him, and John Bettis, I mean, who's a Hall of Famer songwriter guy, I was just like, wow, I'm like way out of my league, but let's do this. And I had a riff that I had for a long time, from even back in the Belmont days, that I always kind of tagged. I'm like, if I ever get a chance to write with Wayne Kirkpatrick, this is what I'm playing, and sure enough, that's what I did. And he's like, I love it. And then, and so he and I started writing more and more, and we would write a bunch of songs, and then the ones that were kind of worthy, he would bring in a band. Mm-hmm. And at the time he was producing Little Big Town, kind of helped developing their sound. This is the early days. And so they would sing on my songs on the demos, and then he'd have Chris McHugh and Jimmy Lee Sloas and Mark Childers and all those guys playing on it. And it was, there was one song, the song is called Wonder Woman, and at the end, Wayne just said, hey man, just play dobro, just play and we'll fade it out. Just play until you don't want to play anymore. So, I just sat in the studio just playing this solo and just playing and playing and playing and playing. And then when he brought the band in, Chris McHugh was the drummer, and he was just with Keith in terms of the live band, had just gotten with Keith because he had done studio stuff for many years, but Keith was putting together a new band, and Chris McHugh said, Wayne, who's that? And he said, well, that's the co-writer, Chad. He's in the band Pinmonkey. And he's like, well, we're looking for a slide player. I need to get his information. Yeah. And so literally that's how that happened in terms of the Keith. And so, Chris McHugh had to pass it on to Mark Hill, who was the music director. And then Mark had to kind of do a little audition with me just to make sure, because, we didn't know each other at all. So Mark calls me up and he said, hey, he goes, these are the instruments, in dobro, which that, and guitar, which, yeah. And he goes, and ganjo or banjo. I'm like, okay, yeah. And he said, and do you play mandolin? I'm like, oh yeah, one of my favorite instruments. And he goes, all right, cool. Well, I'll send the songs over, and then I need you to come over and just kind of, it's more for him, so he can go to Keith saying, yeah, I've heard this guy and everything.
Yeah.
And so, so anyway, he, as soon as I hang up, I'm calling my good friend Zach Childs. Zach, do you have a mandolin I can borrow? I don't have a mandolin. And then you gave me that little blonde, little Ace style kind of thing, and I'm like, all right. So I learned how to play Days Go By, and then I went and auditioned, and then that got me my Keith Urban gig.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that was one of the things that I was hitting on in kind of the intro, is just you have always had this kind of ballsy, kind of on the edge, can do attitude. But it's like it's never kind of smacked you in the face. It's like you've kind of he asked you if you played mandolin, and it's like yes. So then you get off the phone immediately, you're getting a mandolin, but you woodshed and you get it to where it's like no one it's like no one could say, oh, he just started playing the mandolin. Right. I mean you put in the hard work and really that's impressive, and that's That's one of the reasons why you've continued, and there's all these other instances which I don't want to skip ahead. So, but now you're on the road with Keith Urban, and at that point he's got Chris Rodriguez in the band, and there's Chris McHugh, and it's that's quite a live band.
Yeah, and it was definitely something that I had to definitely work hard to, musician wise, to get up to that level. I mean, it was amazing. And there's a guy named Jim Rohn. He always says that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I think that that's very true. He's not a musician, but I think that's true for musicians. You get in a band with people like Chris McHugh and Mark Hill and Steve King and Chris Rodriguez, and it's sink or swim. You've got to come up to that level. And yeah, I mean that's and even back in the Wilkinson days, coming out of college, stepping into where it's all guys, and this is what they do. This is all they do. They're musicians, side musicians, and to step up to the plate and put in the time and really work to that. Put in the time not only just technically and fundamentals, but also with the gear, and have the right gear and be the best you can.
Yeah. Was it hard? I know Pinmonkey wasn't turning out like you wanted it to, but was it hard to leave that kind of being an artist in the band to being a sideman?
Yeah, it was definitely hard. And I'm a very entrepreneurial kind of person anyway. And so it was definitely, I kind of felt like I was kind of selling the family business to move on to kind of more of a job or a gig.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was definitely a difficult thing, which is why I think that's fueled the passion for me to be, continue writing, because that is more the career-driven, be a producer, and just as a career, not just have gigs, but have a full life career. But I think that's something that's kind of, leaving the Pinmonkey was the one thing that kind of fueled everything else.
Yeah, because all through this, you've always, besides the sideman gig, you've always had these other things where again, part of that entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah. On this Keith Urban tour that you're on, this was one of his biggest tours. Which one was it?
It was the Be Here tour.
Okay.
And I think there's one other, but this was like in his meteor roar kind of. I mean, it went crazy. Like every show, it just was like unbelievable, just kind of crazier. Yeah. Fans and just it was spectacular to watch that.
He has a great energy. And
Yeah.
he has a magnetism to him, and people really respond to it.
Yeah, and I learned a lot from him in terms of being an entertainer.
Yeah.
And also, of course, he's just an incredible guitar player and everything, but it was still about the live aspect of it. I mean, like, if he messed up on guitar, but it was a great moment, it's like, okay, great, let's just, and he wouldn't, like, get flustered because he messed up, or,
Yeah.
There's a couple of times where he'd walk out through the crowd, and, people would grab his arm and you'd hear, on guitar or whatever. But it was just part of the experience. And I've really learned from that in terms of just, it's music, and it's not, just because it's not perfect doesn't mean it's not a great experience for people.
Right.
And so that was one thing that I really learned from him.
Yeah. One of the things that people don't think about is that, as a sideman, you're still part of the entertainment.
Right.
And so going from Pinmonkey to playing with Keith, how did you handle yourself differently on stage?
Well, and the cool thing about Keith was he's comfortable enough with himself where, hey, you want to take a solo? Go on up to the front of the stage and take your solo.
Yeah.
Basically his thing was, you're not going to upstage me.
Yeah. Because he had that confidence.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of freedom in that. But anytime we did anything on camera, or like, we did a live DVD, living right here, right now, where, for the camera angles, they're like, hey, kind of stay in your spot. There's things like that.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the concert in general, there's definitely lighting cues that you needed to hit, where they're like, hey, at this point of the show, these lights are going to be on, so you need to be in your spot. Yeah. But besides that, it was just kind of just do your thing, and I really appreciated that. That made it a little bit easier, especially coming from the Pinmonkey days. So
then we get to Kenny Loggins.
Yeah.
So then you got to call, play with Kenny, and he hadn't really had a dobro player in the band before. What caused him, again, it's like this instrument is getting you in all these different places.
I know, it was kind of crazy. So Kenny called me on my landline at home. And so I had a buddy in college, Danny, and he and I would always prank call each other, or if one didn't answer the phone, it was like, hey, it's Paul McCartney. Saw you, I was wanting you to join my band, but you didn't answer, it was stupid stuff,
Yeah.
And so we'd always prank each other. And so when I saw this call, and he's from California, Danny is, and so I saw this call from California, I'm like, okay, well, this is weird. So I answered it, because no one calls me on my landline. And so I answered it, and he goes, hey, I'm looking for Chad. This is Kenny. I'm like, Danny. And he goes, no, it's Kenny Loggins. I'm like, Danny, come on. Where are you going? He's like, no, it's Kenny. And I'm like, oh. And I could hear the timbre in the voice. I'm like, oh, that's Kenny Loggins.
Yeah.
My favorite Beatle is Paul McCartney. And my favorite, I'm like, what do you say to Kenny Loggins? And so he said that, he goes, I just finished an album that has a lot of slide work. And he goes, Chris Rodriguez says you're the guy. So can you be in LA in 4 weeks and let's rehearse and go on the road? I'm like, yeah, of course. And so, eventually they sent me the music, and sent me, 25 different songs, because it wasn't just the album. It was also all the other songs from 3 or 4 decades that he's got, and there's different versions of every song. Right. So they're sending me all these different versions and everything, but it was a set list of about 25 or so that they wanted me to learn. And so in that order, because they kind of had what was going to be kind of the first release or the first single and things like that. So I learned what I followed directions and learned everything. So I fly out to LA. We're in the rehearsal studio, or in the rehearsal space. And the way he would do his rehearsals was he would have like kind of a bullpen for each instrument. So like drums was Tom Breckline, Stevie DeStanislaw, or Stevie D. And then like on guitar would be Gene Miller, Chris Rodriguez, Scott Bernard. And then, so like every instrument had multiple people, because throughout the year, Stevie D plays with Pink Floyd and David Crosby. So he might be doing the date with them. And so Kenny would have a different drummer. And so walking into that rehearsal space was very intimidating, because I'm just like, wow, this is a high level. And so everyone was set up in somewhat of a horseshoe, with Kenny being in the middle. And so I'm walking in with my guitars and pedal board, and I'm like, where do you guys want me? And they're like, right in front of Kenny's where we want to set you up. And I'm like, oh man, okay. we got this, we got, and because also I'd heard how Kenny's ears, he's just so in tune, and like he knows his stuff. This is not just an artist, he's produced this stuff and wrote all of his stuff, and then he knew it inside and out. And so I sit down in front of him and get my sounds and everything, and he said, all right, let's start rehearsals. And the song they picked was 25 on that list of everything they wanted me to learn, one being the priority, 55 not being the priority. And so I'm like, okay. And, it's not that I hadn't spent a lot of time with that song, just in the context of this set list. And so we played the song, and then after the song was done, it was that awkward quietness, that in rehearsal, and everyone's thinking, what is he thinking? And I'm sweating bullets. I'm like, either this is really, really not good, or or we're hanging in there. And Kenny just said, all right, let's do it again. So then games are being played in my head. I'm like, okay, do I do what I just did, or do I take it apart? And so anyway, I did it like I just had played it, which was just verbatim from the album, note for note. And then after the second time, he just looked at me and said, that's great. And I'm like, whew, oh my gosh, what a relief. And so then we did a couple more songs, in that rehearsal. And then, I was playing note for note from what they sent me. And then after that, he just said, hey, he goes, clearly the recordings and everything, just play what you want to play. And so from that moment on, it was awesome, and probably one of the most musical gigs I've ever had, because it was challenging because there's so many different versions, and in rehearsals we would work out a new version. So then that night when we're playing, you're thinking, okay, is this sound check or is this the one from the Redwoods, live at Redwoods, which Sonny Landreth played slide on. Yeah. And so I was like, man, these are some big shoes I'm feeling here, but much like the Keith Urban, Kenny Loggins was so confident in himself. He's like, man, I'm all right. I had a solo, and he said, just get up to the edge of the stage and you play as long as you want. And we had a channel going back into the song, and he said, hey, just look back, give me a nod, and we'll go to the channel. But it was very musically freeing just to play, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think you hit on an important kind of note in that, because there's a lot of other gigs that you've been on where you don't have the freedom,
right?
Where you don't have the ability to be improvisational,
right?
To just go to the edge of the stage and play whatever you want to play, and then when you're done, to look back.
Right.
That's a rare thing.
It is a rare, and especially with newer artists where they're trying to fit into a format and trying to fit time-wise into certain things, and hey, just play it note for note, play the solo note for note, then we'll just keep going. And so to have the music freedom was really nice.
Yeah. So then we get up to Carrie Underwood. Mm-hmm. So how did you get the call for that?
I had met Mark Childers, who was our music director, years ago with the Keith Urban gig, and he was with a different artist. And after the show, they came over and just hung out on our bus, and just shared war stories like we do. And I remember before he left, I wasn't looking for a gig or anything. I just said, hey man, if you ever need a slide player, hey, here's my number. Just give me a shout, And he did. He called me, and Keith, we were on this crazy world tour, and I remember I was in Germany, and I was checking my voicemail because cell phones didn't work over there, and so I was checking my voicemail from the airport, and I got a call from Mark, and he wanted me to do some TV stuff with this artist, and obviously I couldn't possibly work it out, so I called him, and I just said, hey, I just want to let you know, I would love to, but I can't do that. And, because to me, that's doing the right thing, is returning someone's phone call and just letting them know that you can or cannot do something. But little did I know that it was kind of those little things that he actually said that really impressed him a lot, that I at least let him know that I couldn't do it. And then when it rolled around, when Carrie needed a slide player, because at that point she didn't have anything, I didn't have a player for that. He called me and he said, hey, you might not remember me, but Mark Childers. And of course I remember. And he said, hey, Carrie, we're looking for a slide player, and you're the guy. Can you meet with management this afternoon? And I was walking into a writing session in Nashville on Music Row, and at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I said, well, yeah, I can make it, but I'm in jeans and a T-shirt, and I don't have my slide guitar. I had just an acoustic. And he said, no. He said, they just want to just meet with you. And so I met up with management, and then that was it.
Wow. No audition, you just, there you go.
So I've learned, don't let people hear you play. Because everyone, you're like, you want to hear me play? No.
So now with Carrie, this again, part of this, alluding to from the intro, with this can-do attitude, there's been a succession of, hey, we need you to play this.
Yeah.
And even though you didn't know how to do that maybe very well,
right.
or maybe you hadn't played it in a long time, but you've had a series of instruments that you've picked up. So the first one would have been pedal steel.
Yeah. So they hired me to play slide guitar. And so I was playing, dobro and lap steel mainly with that. And I was just doing a lot of behind the bar bends. I was tuning the B string, which I'm in an open G tuning, but then I would tune the B down to an open A. And so then I would bend it all the way up, to kind of give it that steely sound, that and a volume pedal and some verb to kind of give that effect. And, there is no replicating a pedal steel guitar. I mean, it's so unique. So one day I called Mark, our music director, up, and I said, hey, because it was taking me forever to learn some of these pedal steel licks on a lap steel, and it wasn't translating. And I just asked him, I said, do you mind if I just grab a pedal steel and just learn it? Of course, pedal steel is one of the hardest instruments. And he kind of laughed, and he just said, yeah, man, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
And literally about a month later, I'm playing it on the Opry because I just went all in, and I had some great kind of teachers. Tommy White from the Opry helped me out quite a bit. I had a steel teacher that helped me just in terms of just the mechanics and kind of how to do it, And then after that, it was just time. It was become more ambidextrous, in terms of, pedals and levers and I kind of had the bar, I had the bar and the finger picks. I kind of had that already under my hands from this, but it was a matter of incorporating everything else at the same time and moving forward with it.
So how much were you practicing on the pedal steel to get ready for that first, Opry gig?
Oh, it was all I was doing. And it's you have to learn it slow. I mean, I always heard the fastest way to learn a fast lick is to learn it slow.
Yes.
And it's to slow it way down. And then the same thing with the pedal steel. And what was crazy was just, I'd be looking at my right foot or my left foot and be like, all right, first two pedals down. And then I'd do that. And then like, all right, rock it. And then, and you're kind of talking to your body and you're like trying to get the feeling, because after you learn it is more of just a feeling. It's like whenever you pick up a guitar, it's like G. You don't even think about it,
right.
or D. And that's the way I had to get on the pedal steel, where I just didn't have to think about it. My hands just muscle memory went there.
Yeah, and she did she normally did more contemporary sounding material, but she did, she did a duet with Randy Travis, and so of course it was.
I Told You So.
I Told
was
You
a
So.
song,
yeah.
and so that was, I really had to work a lot to get that, because so much about the pedal steel is not just the notes; it's how you make them feel and how they translate. It's just that emotional sound of the guitar.
Well, and that instrument, that's really what gives that material a lot of its atmosphere. By adding that one instrument, all of a sudden, it really pulls it into the right feel and mood for that song.
Yeah, and so for me, it was diving into Mike Johnson played a lot on her albums. but the Tommy White and John Huey, which I've always been a big fan of.
Yeah.
You know, from the Conway Twitty stuff, and then of course Paul Franklin is the guy, you know,
gold
for all
standard.
that.
Yeah.
But then also, you know, a big influence of mine was Daniel Lanois. So learning kind of, you know, his, which was definitely a departure from everything else in terms of the country stuff. And at one point, I thought about maybe not using finger picks because he does more, you know, just skin. And thankfully, people like Tommy White just said, no, if you're going to do this country, you need your finger picks. So.
Yeah. And you can still do the Lanois thing with your finger picks.
Yeah.
So the next instrument that you kind of pulled in was a harmonica. So what happened with harmonica? How did that come up?
So Mark, our music director, called me up. He said, "Hey Chad, he goes, I haven't heard the part yet because they were still recording and mixing it and everything." And he said, "But I hear that there's a harmonica. Do you play harmonica?" I'm like, "Absolutely." Yeah. Anyway, I said, "Well, I've got some harmonicas, but you know, how involved is this harmonica part? You know, is it just kind of a, you know, singer-songwriter kind of, or is it like a Terry McMillan, you know, P.T. Gazelle kind of thing?"
Right.
And he said, I don't know yet." And he goes, "Well, you know, the backup, we could do lap steel if we need to." So, you know, I kind of had that in the back pocket, but I'm thinking, man, if it's a harmonica part, learn the harmonica. And so so I got a harmonica and started working on it. And, you know, of course I tried, you know, all the little booklets that you get with a harmonica, and I tried some YouTubes, and I'm like, And then I heard the part, and it was pretty involved. And I'm like, okay, this gets my attention. And so I asked Mark, who played on the album, and so he got me the name of the guy and got his number for me. It's Travis Meadows.
Okay.
And so one thing I love about Nashville is just the openness of people with knowledge that they know and everything. So I called Travis up and I said, "Travis," I said, "you don't know me from Adam." And, you know, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you don't have to help me. I mean, I understand if you don't.
Yeah.
But I said, I play in Carrie's band, and this harmonica part that you played. And I said, "Would you mind showing me kind of what you did?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah, man, absolutely." So he and I, we meet in a parking lot over off West End at Ted's Montana Grill, because that's the only place he was leaving town and I was coming into town, and just seemed to make sense. And so we're standing outside of my car, and it's starting to rain, and I'm like, "All right, what did you play?" And he goes, "Oh, I don't know." He goes, I played, 6 different times, and I guess they comped it together, so I don't know what actually made it." I'm like, "Okay." So I had a recording of just my track, not of the other music, just a track. So I put it in, and so we're just waiting, and I don't have a waveform, so I can't so we're just standing there kind of awkwardly staring at each other.
Yeah.
And it's starting to rain, and we both have harmonicas here in the parking lot. And I'm like, man, this is so Nashville, learning harmonica in the parking lot. And so then it would come up, so then he would play some things for me, and then I just kind of learned it from that. And so I worked really hard for about a month or so getting that. And Mark would periodically call me and say, "Hey, how's that harmonica coming?" Like, "Well, it's getting there, And he said, "Well, Carrie wants to learn it." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Oh, did I waste all this time?" And he goes, No. He goes, "I think it's going to be you guys together." And so what it turned into was actually she and I, this is on the Storyteller tour. And so the stage went lengthwise of the arena. So we're in the round. She and I in the very center doing a harmonica dueling with each other. And then it kicks into the song Choctaw, which is the harmonica. And it turned into one of my favorite moments of the show.
Yeah.
Was playing harmonica. And what was funny, people would come out to the show. A lot of my friends are like, "Dude, you're like amazing on harmonica." I'm like, "Yeah, how about guitar?" Yeah. That's what I've been working my whole life on. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, but man, a harmonica." And I'm like, "Okay, I guess that's good."
It's always funny, what people will say. But yeah, But that was an important part of the show.
It was.
Yeah, and it was like, and you were there, kind of having a harmonica duel with your boss.
Yeah, and actually the very first thing we ever did, we were doing a promo tour, which when you do promo tours, you're doing a lot of TV, you're doing, internet, radio kind of things. And so our very first thing that I ever played harmonica on in front of anybody was the Today Show. So in front of millions of people. And so actually I texted Travis the night before, Travis Meadows, and I said, hey, we're going to be on the Today Show tomorrow and I'm playing harmonica. It's going to be great. Yeah. Hopefully great, good, great on the good side, but it turned out really good. And but it was fun learning that and diving into it.
Yeah. And the latest is saxophone.
So I played saxophone in grade school and in high school. I played multiple instruments, started on drums, went to piano, guitar, because our guitar player quit, and so I just hopped into guitar, and then eventually the dobro. And then also I played saxophone in just high school band kind of thing. And actually I had a scholarship to some other universities, not Belmont, and that I did not take because I didn't want to play saxophone for the rest of my life. Guitars, that's what gets the chicks, So it was all about guitars. And so literally after I did not take the scholarships, I just kind of shelved the saxophone for 20 some years. And so it was the early 2019, and I was watching a music bio of Chet Baker. It was a live thing that Nashville Jazz Workshop puts on here. And Chet is one of my favorite musicians of all time. Lived a very troubled life and drugs and women and all kinds of crazy stuff. But this was really cool how they would play some of his songs live, and then they would talk about his crazy life. And there was a saxophone player in that band that was really good, and I thought, wonder if I could still play saxophone. And I didn't want to be like that guy, like, well, back in high school, I was, the best, And, but I just, it was kind of in the back of my mind. And literally a week later, Mark, our music director, sends out a text to the band saying, hey, does anybody play saxophone in the band? And I'm like, this is kind of freaky. And then someone said, hey, I think Chad had scholarships, whatever. And I'm like, oh, thanks for calling me out. And so I just thought, let's give it a shot. And I called up a company here in Nashville, Jupiter Sax, and I just said, here's the situation. I don't have anything, and you could have possibly an instrument on the Carrie Underwood tour. And they're like, yeah, we're all about it. So I went over to their place here in Nashville, and they said, well, what size reed do you use? I'm like, I don't know. What kind of ligature? I don't know. What kind of mouth? I'm like, I just put it together and let's see. And it remarkably, it just kind of came back to me. And so I went into rehearsal with the guys and with the sax in hand, literally not playing. And they're like, get it out and start playing. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is going to take a little time. But I went in with, kind of check the ego at the curb. And I just said, hey, look, you guys asked for this, so you're about to get it.
Yeah.
And so, but I kind of had them part of the process, and which is kind of the only way to do it, just with humility, because there's no hiding that I can't, that I wasn't up to snuff on sax. And the thing with any kind of instrument like that is building the embouchure and it's muscles, and so you can't rush it. It's just endurance. And so I learned the sax, and it actually become also a focal point of the Cry Pretty Tour 360, where basically all the lights went out, and then it's just me on this ramp. We call it the monorail that kind of went around this stage. And so I did like a 20 or 30 seconds, and just me and our piano player, Scott Sheriff. And so I would just play and then start walking down this ramp in the dark. So marching sax kind of helped me a little bit with this. And then it got to a point where it was me and Mark Childers playing upright bass, and then Carrie, and it was kind of a jazz kind of scene. They brought screens down and made it look really smoky, and Chase Lounge, and turned out to be a fun thing. And it was a lot of fun, but once again, it was a lot of work just to get up to speed and to to kind of learn how to play sax as a sax player and not as a guitar player playing sax, which was, that was one of the tougher things.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Every night on tour, it got my attention because I'm like, here it is.
You've got to
for it.
really concentrate.
But it was awesome having people like Jupiter and Diodario, who does the mouthpiece and everything, for their support, which has meant the world to me, that they helped me out.
Yeah. So besides, playing with Carrie for the last almost 13 years, you've also have your own projects where you do some coaching. You wrote a book a while back.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so so many people would come up to me when we're out on the road and everything. They're like, "How did you get a gig with Carrie? And how did you get a gig with Kenny and Keith? And how did you get signed to RCA and all these things?" And as we know and kind of been talking about, it's not just one answer. It's a process. It's relationships. It's all those things. And so I just thought, why not just put it into a book? And so I did that, and then a whole speaking career came from that. So I'd go to different media institutes and universities and schools talking about being a musician and the ins and outs of it. And then eventually Belmont called me, and they said, because I'd been doing some guest lectures and things there, and they said, "Hey, would you want to be an adjunct professor?" And so I said, "Sure, I've always wanted to do that." And so I went in and leaned into that of just being an adjunct and created a course for him. And then Carrie, then we got busy and I got back on the road, which of course I can't do both because you have to literally physically be there in a classroom. So I created an online course called Backstage Notes. And so it's a lot of what I taught in a college class, but it's the ins and outs of being in this business, a lot of the stuff we've discussed here, and just the path to help people with their journey. And I interviewed 7 different experts in this business, hit songwriters, hit engineers. Jimmy Olander, my longtime mentor, I had to interview him. So it's a very comprehensive course to help people who are either looking at moving to Nashville or want to just pursue music in general.
Yeah.
So backstagenotes.com/Truetone. So anyone who's watching this, there's actually some special stuff I'm giving away. They can just, we'll have a link to them. And so
awesome.
Just check it out.
Cool. So Chad, tell us, what made you pick up the dobro in the first place?
Gosh, I was probably 14 years old, and I was already playing guitar a lot in the band with Matt and my brother, and we had a friend, Kelly, that played with us. But and one night I was watching the American Music Shop, which is a TV show that was like all the A players. It was the the slingers. I mean, they were amazing. It was Mark O'Connor and Jerry Douglas and Brent Mason and Harry Stinson, Matt Rawlings, or John Jarvis. But anyway, it was great players, and they would always bring on kind of left of center guests or more independent guests. And this particular night that I was watching, it was Leo Kottke. And then Jerry Douglas had a couple of solos. And, you know, with Jerry, I was just like, man, whatever that thing is, that's what I want to do. That is so cool. And so I went to my local record shop and bought, you know, Leo Kottke album. And so I just dove into that. And, you know, Jerry was on that. And then it was produced by T-Bone Burnett. So, you know, at this moment in my life, you know, a lot of my music stuff was really starting to be shaped. And so here I have Leo Kottke, Jerry Douglas, and T-Bone Burnett. So then I just start looking for anything with Jerry Douglas. So Alison Krauss, you know, he was producing her, and then some other people, you know, that you know, anything kind of dobro slide that was on the Nashville Network, which is what American Music Shop was on, it was Jerry Douglas. And so then Strength in Numbers eventually, which is a little band that an acoustic band. And then I was diving into T-Bone Burnett stuff, so which was a wide array of stuff. And so that was what got me started in terms of just the dobro. I had a guitar teacher that I'd been taking, you know, for the last couple of years, and he also played a pedal steel, and he had a dobro. And so I picked up his dobro, and it literally just kind of fell under my hands. And my parents had already bought like a banjo and a fiddle for my brother and me to try different instruments, which to no real avail on that in terms of taking it seriously. So whenever I said, hey, I want a dobro, they're like, yeah. And because the cheapest one is about $1,000 at the time, you know, and couldn't find many used ones in our little town. And so my dad had two guitars, and he had a Gibson 63 Dove, which is one he normally played, which he had since 63. And then he had an Ovation guitar. So he let me use the Ovation guitar, and I put a pencil up under the nut to raise the strings. And then where he worked at Eastman, he had a machinist make a dobro bar. So he got my guitar teachers and traced it and took it and had one made. And so that's how I learned dobro, was on an Ovation guitar, which kept trying to slide off.
Right, because it's got the round belly. Yeah.
And so, but that's how, I mean, I don't know if there's any wood on that guitar, so nothing really warped, because that's why the neck is so, you know, thick on the dobro, because of the tension. But that's really how I learned the dobro. And then Rick, my music teacher, my guitar teacher, would show me stuff. And then about, I don't know, 2 months in, he went to my dad and he just said, he goes, man, I can't teach him anything else. He goes, he needs a dobro. And then that Christmas I got my first dobro, and that's what started me on that path.
Yeah. So, you know, kind of show us, you know, a little bit of what, you know, of course the dobro normally has a square neck.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then you've got a wooden body, and then it's got this, you know, resonator, and the resonator is what kind of gives it its attack and tone.
Yeah, for sure. And so, and actually dobro is a brand name. Yeah. So the kind of the technical term is resophonic guitar. And so and this is a resonator. And so that dobro, which is owned by Gibson, and this particular guitar, I had Tim Shearhorn, who makes really high-end resophonic guitars that look like this. He actually took this all apart and put it back together with his parts, made a new nut, made a new insert, new resonator, the pickup and everything like that. So, yeah, and so this is I call this one the mule. This is the one that's been around the world with me multiple times and war zones and everything. But this is my go-to, even though I have a couple, but this is my favorite.
Yeah.
And then I've got a Sunrise pickup in it, which I believe that was from you, Zach, that in which also Leo Kottke played, right. And then also Sean Colvin. You know, she had one in I think her Loudon guitar, which are amazing guitars. But so I needed a magnetic pickup for this. So the way this guitar is set up is the piezo or piezo, however you say it, is back here, which is for the acoustic, and that is on the tip of the jack, and so. Then this is on the ring. So this is a TRS jack. So whenever I just plug a normal guitar cable in, it's this pickup. with a TRS, I can split the signal. And so this was during the Pinmonkey days where we had some lap steel and then also dobro, and I was going back and forth, so I could easily go back and forth from the two different pickups.
Yes, with one instrument.
With one instrument, yeah.
That's a great, kind of dual source system, because yes, this is going to give more of an electric sound.
Right.
Because it's it's basically an electric guitar pickup right underneath the strings.
Right.
And so by having the two systems, you can really get a neat variety of sounds.
And what's good about this one is also it's a big magnet. So in terms of like interference and things like that, it's not as great as some of the other pickups that I experimented with.
So if you were having kind of feedback problems and stuff, you could rely more on that other
Go to
pickup.
that one, yeah. And it's got adjustable poles. So on some strings are a little bit hotter than others. They respond differently. You can adjust it.
Even it out. Well, play us a little bit so we can hear the hear the sound of it a little bit.
Okay.
Now, you also mentioned bending behind the bar.
Yeah. So what? So and it was on the lap steel, but I could. Oh.
Yeah. And where does that come from? Who did that first?
I don't know. There's probably a lot.
Okay. Yeah. I was just
know.
wondering, but yeah, that's a kind of a dobro technique, and it's that's a good question, finding where that came from, and it's a neat dobro technique.
Yeah, and I mean the thing, especially on lap steel, it's good. It's very limiting in terms of you can.
Yeah.
You're kind of a one-trick pony with a lot of things.
Yeah.
So for me, that was the breaking point of saying, all right, let's do pedal steel.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've got your lap steel out.
That's right.
So tell us a bit about this lap steel first, because this is awesome.
Yeah, so I just got this for the tour last year, and I'd seen Jerry Douglas play one like this that was a Telecaster body but with a thicker neck, and I did some research, and come to find out, Alan Jackson, who I'd met on that very first gig that we talked about, I called him up and I said, hey, you're on their website in terms of mainly these necks, which is called Lap Dancer, redneck lap dancers. So anyway, I said, what's the story on that? And he said, oh man, he goes, Jerry Douglas gave me a lap steel, and he goes, man, do you want it? I would love to just, get it to you. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. So he brought it over, and that's what this is. It's just a kind of, I think it's a Mexican body with this lap dancer neck on it, the red neck. And then it had some cheap, just Seymour Duncan Korean pickups in it. So I got Russ Paul, who is an amazing musician, slide player, everything. But he also wounds his own pickups.
Yes, we've had a number of guests on the show that have had his full guitars that he's made.
Yeah. And so anyway, I called him up and I said, man, I would love to get some of your pickups, and told him what I had. And so he handpicked these for me, and which they sound great. And so Jim Whitfield's my guitar tech, and then also one of the guys that's on our tour was Eddie Van Halen's guitar tech. So he kind of helped with it. So this is called the Legend guitar. So of all the history behind it, but it's great. And actually, whenever I play live, there's a little contraption that goes back here that's a pad, so I can actually stand up and play. Which on that particular tour is they wanted us to be very mobile. Right. And to walk around, so had to adapt to that.
Just to hit on that for a bit, the Carrie tours went from being very much kind of what you would call normal backline with amps and such, and then in the past number of tours, because of the sophistication of the stages and everything, it changed to where
changed dramatically. Yeah, and so with that, I mean, even on the traditional aspect of it, our amps were still like 100 feet away from us. And so at the pedal board, we'd have to use a radio box, flip the signal,
Right.
and then send it 100 feet, and then flip the signal back to plug it into the amp. And it, in theory, it's kind of a good idea. And then they're in ISO boxes, so they're mic'd up and everything. And of course, the amp would get shifted, the mic would get shifted, so you're still having to fine tune it. And it was on the Storyteller tour when Sean Tubbs it was kind of his mastermind to. He saw the direction that the tours were going with ours particular, because we went from the stage being on one side of the arena to being in the middle, going to full length, and space is really limited for us. And so we went the fractal route, and which for me it was definitely a little bit of a learning curve with that, because I love pedals, and I love pedals with the pots on it, that I can turn the pots, and I don't like scrolling, I don't like screens, that kind of thing. So with the fractal, it was, there is a program that I was able to sit at my computer and dial in my sounds, and then we were able to go with it, which in terms of that tour, the fractal is the only way to go because of just the logistics of everything.
Yeah, because everything's moving around. And
right.
Yeah.
But for me, nothing's better than a guitar, a couple of pedals, and an amp.
Yeah. So you've got this guitar. This looks like an old Gibson Goldtone amp.
It is, yeah, the GA15.
Yeah.
And I love this amp. And this is kind of my go-to amp. It's just, it's got the body that I'm always looking for in terms of lap steel and everything. And it's just been my go-to.
Yeah, that was back when Gibson had bought Trace Elliot.
Exactly.
And that was a Trace Elliot amp, and then of course it became a Gibson amp. And
right.
it was a vintage 30 in there. Those are great little EL84 powered amp.
That's right.
Yeah. And then tell us about your pedal board here that you've got.
So the pedal board, the to the right is the lap steel, and to the left is the dobro.
Okay.
This is like pretty much my only acoustic rig, is just a LR bags, a Paracoustic DI, and just a Boss tuner. I know it's not the fanciest, but it is so. And for whatever reason, these LR bags just respond the best to the McIntyre piezo that I have in the dobro.
Right.
So
again, the more acoustic sounding pickup on the dobro.
Yes.
The McIntyre, it's going through the Boss tuner and the Paracoustic DI.
Correct.
And then
the lap steel, and especially this one that I have right now, it just runs through the open road, and then this ARP 87, which is a walrus pedals, and then the slow pedal, which is also a walrus. So this is just a delay, and then this is kind of a delay, but kind of an ambient, kind of just spacey kind of thing. That there was one part of the Carrie show, and actually I use both of these for pedal still. I have a Quilter amp, and I use those in the effects loop. And there was just something that they needed, a little spaciness, and so I'm like, my Daniel Lanois influence kicked in, and they're great little pedals, and they added definitely a different dimension to the sound.
Well, yeah, show us the pedals real quick.
Yeah, this is the. I love having the little bit of the slap back, in terms of. Not that. There we go. That's not good. Let me do this. And then, of course, with a little bit of the
very nice.
And so, and like in terms of distortion pedals, I don't use a whole lot. I try to get as much as I can from the amp, and I just try to get most out of this. But I love the little overdrive. It just adds just a little bit of something to it. And then with the slow pedal, it's more of a. So it's got a lot of
Yeah.
different dimensions to it, and a little bit of a harmonizer and a little bit of a warble, kind of.
Yeah, got a little, that high octave thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just like to keep it simple. I try to get as much as I can out of the guitar and the amp, and then the pedals are just kind of the added. You know, if I do need an effect of sorts, I use the pedals for that.
Yeah. And what type of volume pedal is that?
This is a Goodrich, and this is the Goodrich is pretty much what I use on the pedal steel most of the time. This last tour I used the Hilton, which is more of the optic, and I really like that. But this, in terms of like for a pedal with a pot in it, I really like the Goodrich. It's kind of got the low profile, so.
Yeah. Now, is that the one with the preamp in it and everything, or is this
No,
just
it's
standard
just a
passive?
straight, yeah.
Very cool. Well, Chad, I really appreciate you being on the show. It was
Thank
a
you,
real
Zach.
treat for you to come out and you know, and get to hear, you know, some dobro, get to hear your amazing story, and also the inspiration of just having a can-do attitude and just being, you know, putting in the hard work and, you know, putting it out there and saying yes and taking those risks. So,
Well, thank you, and thank you for your influence through the years and your guidance, man. You've helped me a lot just in terms of anything guitar. You've always been great with that, and just a great friend. So I appreciate it.
cool. Thanks.